This conference will now be recorded.
Now we're 35 seconds. I call the meeting, special meeting, Finance Committee. We're going to pick up kind of where we left off yesterday. If there's any questions, then we're going to talk about the general fund, special revenue funds, enterprise funds, transfer debt service, 70/30 cost recovery plan, and AP aging report. So before we get started, I guess, welcome, Councilor Perry. You're on the phone, I trust. Hello?
He's muted. Councilor Perry?
Councilor Perry.
We need him to unmute.
Well,
He's got to unmute himself.
he's going to appear by phone. I hope he can
I just seen a
appear.
It
text.
shows on the screen and I'll send him a message.
You gotta send him a text one?
Yes.
Well, let the minutes reflect that three of the Finance Committee members are present.
Mr. Chair, Councilor Perry did say that he can hear us, but we can't hear him. I'm not sure if he has any technical difficulties on his side.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Sorry about that, Jason. So, and Councilman Perry is telephoning in, although it's going to be a one-sided conversation. Okay, anybody have any questions from yesterday? Get those cleared up first.
And unless there's any other questions, Mr. Chair, on the topics, the general fund revenues or some of the special revenue funds that we covered, we can proceed and kind of go over the enterprise funds on the revenue sides, starting with the 5,100. Start going from there and the next group of funds, and then going to the report.
Everybody ready? Everybody listening to the paperwork out. I don't know what that means exactly.
I'm trying to find. Yeah, in my paper.
5,100.
Did you get, have we,
Each number at the end is
all the members have the
17. Or well,
transfer sheet?
Copies,
Just
I
the
have-
transfers.
because I know yesterday we didn't have enough copies for everybody, so we made extra copies. It's Counselor O'Shea, so.
That's transfers, we're not there yet.
We need more copies.
That's your numbers.
Yeah, it's the original that I got.
page 17, page 18. We're on the,
Is that it?
on the enterprise, the revenues on the enterprise.
So starting the very bottom line there starts.
Okay, I think we're ready. Go ahead.
Okay,
Welcome.
the grants are based on what the airport believes they're going to receive in the year, grants that they've applied for, and what is in the works that will be carried over into next fiscal year. So those are numbers that were supplied to us by Mr. Stark. We go down into the charges for services, the same thing. It's based on what Mr. Stark gave us as revenue coming in for the different fees that they charge out there. The water charge, those items, what is it, 50 or 45, 70, 30 and 45, 70, 35 would be where we would have booked the revenue for water for the airport. And since we've moved those, we're going to move those at year end into the water fund. That's where Joe was talking yesterday about the water rights. So that's why those are zeroed on there. Again, all of the charges for services were provided by the airport. Keep going. So And the rental of the buildings is the same. It's what the airport told us that they would be receiving for the year on all of the rentals out there. The land lease, the same. Interest is not a lot, so it's just budgeted at what we're going to get this year. And it gives them 12,794,000 as revenue for the airport for fiscal year 23.
Probably just a little background on that rental for the buildings, because we do have almost all the leases are going up incrementally or higher. But we have removed a couple buildings from the ability to rent them as well too. So that's why we're going to stay with that, keep that number essentially pretty solid across. We would hope again that we're conservative in our estimate for those building rentals. And we would hope that it'll be higher at the end of the conversation. So that's why you're seeing the rental of the buildings. But like building 112, we took out of service and we won't be renting that building. We'll be demoing it at some point in time. And that's still one of the long ones. 112 and 115 are either side of the railroad tracks in the long building. There's enough damage to that building that it was easier to take everybody out and just close the building.
Well, that's right adjacent to the eastern water tower there.
Yeah, right there in that area there. So the tracks don't go across where Aragon is at. It stops at the road there. They've been removed or covered over on their road that runs through there. But we could eventually reopen it. So the idea, the concept for the vision is to rebuild those buildings kind of as sister buildings again on either side, and then extend the tracks on into the air center a little bit farther in the future. It's a long-term one. It's not for this year. But that's why the rents in the building are remaining as close to what they were in the past. We'll see an increase in most of the leases are going up incrementally over a 3-year, 5-year window. But because we've taken a couple buildings out of service, then you're going to see that number probably stay closer to where the estimate is. So
what percentage of the buildings that you have out there under lease, remind me again?
We're right around the 90% level of leasing. Now, the building that had Department of Health in it, that's got some space leased out of it, but not all of it. We have 1081 over on the other side. That's the building right there outside of the Millennial building. That one's open. We do have some storage in the back. I think Aerocell has some space in the back. So we have parts of every building. And then we vacated the old cookie factory, 93, and that is sitting empty. We're actually remodeling it right now to get it ready for marketing to a business that can use that type of a building again. So I would say we're anywhere from 80 to 90% at capacity, but we have those little spaces out there that are open for different things. I think you had mentioned about the I3 building, that we talked about using for that 240,000 square foot space in that one corner. That building's open as well too. So.
And 1081 still needs some work done to it too.
Yeah, 1081 is one that when we have the time and a little bit of extra cash, we're going to be correcting the work inside there. It needed some new ceiling tile within there, some new lighting. The carpeting was really, really bad. I think it was at the time of the build, it probably wasn't that bad. I shouldn't say that. I don't think it's that old, but the carpet is in pretty bad shape from the use that it's had over the years. So.
Let's see, is the airport, the physical structures out there, is that in the infrastructure committee? Is that where that's all planned out?
Yeah, in the last year, what we've done is we've moved, we talk about the infrastructure projects at the Air Center in infrastructure. Plus we can talk about them at legal, and then we get into finance as well too. So depending on what the need is for the conversation as far as the vision, funding or something, we'll move it through one of those 3 committees based upon those needs.
So, of course, we've already voted on the plan that the FAA wants us to do, and they funded most of it. Or do we have any other plans, like there's been talk about expanding the air terminal, which I think needs to happen, regardless if we get a flight out of Denver, but
We have preliminary drawings for the start of the renovation of that building. It's not went very far. Right now, probably the project out there that is kind of the precursor to the terminal was the parking lot, the additional parking areas. So that's going on. None of the other bigger projects like that are anywhere at the point where they could be triggered overnight. It'll take a little more conversation with the city council to trigger any of them outside of the Ascent project, which still will take council action anyway from where we're at. The project to get the water and sewer started to the southeast corner, that one's in flux, and so that's just it's going to continue in the next season, financial season. I think that's about all that is out there right now. But we do have preliminary plans for the terminal. There was this conversation going on for the last year, though, as to whether or not to build a brand new one or to renovate the old one. The engineer's plan early on in that plan was to renovate the old one and expand off of it and utilize as much of that space that is still good within the terminal. And then rather than to build a brand new one. So.
well, it's in a brand place from a pilot standpoint. It's right off the intersection of Bravo Alpha and Delta there. And it's just, it's kind of where the air center takes a turn.
The additional flights, even getting some of the flights back from American that we've been downgraded on, it'll take a while to get through the rest of this COVID, whatever you want to call it at this time. We are expecting those flights, the conversation on the Denver flight to pick back up. But it's probably another 8 months away before we really get to have serious conversation. We are talking about a different carrier as well. And so that's part of that challenge with that one. We've had conversations with a couple boutique, smaller airlines that may fly just the puddle jumps essentially. But nothing's coming along with that. That's where the SCADA money would come from. The small airport development money would help to do the MRG for those at that time. But that's the challenge we have in the terminal right now, is that if we have two planes, if we have the Phoenix and the Dallas plane at the same time, those 120 people trying to get them into the secure area to get them boarded is very difficult. And they have to do one plane at a time is how they've been trying to feed through that. I still see on Facebook every once in a while, we're seeing issues with people that can't get through the line fast enough to get to their plane. So that's the extension of that secure area is going to be really important, but we don't have any real true conversations as to what that looks like. Not yet.
Well, I mean, if we're 80-90% occupied out there, then if we're going to invite anybody else, the send's a different deal because we're building specifically, can't even talk to their requirement. Is that something we're anticipating having a discussion with after we get the FAA's deal? How do you see that?
Yeah, I would say that that's going to come in that later conversations. Once we get everybody's sea legs underneath them and everything, we'll start having those conversations. We need to increase, and I guess the goal had been, we need to increase the square footage under roof out there. Not just the stuff that we currently have. We want to add more to that. And I think that's the plans with the southeast corner and everything that's out there, is trying to develop out those areas where we can start setting them. That's why we have the smaller hangar that we bought from Rub, and we just need to get it placed out there and get it up as well too. And so those conversations will happen. Yeah, probably after we get through all of this as well too. Most of that FAA money and everything, there's 90% federal funding for most of that work goes to the runways and the taxiways and the aprons and everything else. And then there's a pecking order that goes out of that as well too. 5% comes from the state FAA, aviation, state aviation, and then the other 5 is ours local. So it's really economical to us in the budget when we're doing all that work. It's just that we need to increase the capacity of other things that will eat our money a little bit different.
I bring it up because we're talking about the airport.
Yep.
This is something that we all need to try to plan out there in the future, how far in the future yet to be determined.
And I would hope, Mr. Chair, I would hope that we add that into this upcoming conversation about the new master plan, because we have to update that master plan. This is the perfect time in order to have all those conversations. So I would expect in the next 12-month period, we'll have all of those conversations within this next year. So.
Councilor Hildebrand, question or comment?
Yeah, just for my information purposes, I'd like to see, you got 19 and 20 actions, but I don't know what your totals are. So,
There you go.
wanting to see what the increases are that we've done out there.
And you can tell by the actuals, it's kind of a ebb and flow depending on what that year was.
And the other thing that and I don't know, I brought this up a little bit yesterday, but you got the grant money up there. That's all tied to specific projects.
That's correct.
That's not variable spending, as I call it. So again, I'd always like to see, subtotal and then total.
Okay.
So we know what our variable spending or variable revenue is. Because I know we're going to find, when we go to the expense side, we're going to find an item that matches up to those 2 grants that are coming out there. But I always just like to look at what our variable income truly is. And same thing when we get to spending. What is our variable spending versus what is committed? And so just makes it easier for me to look at those schedules and understand it. So.
The nice thing is that we're dropping this information in from Tyler into the Excel format because it's easier to move it and everything. So we will be able to do the subtotals, correct?
Right.
Yeah.
And it's important, and we're going to get into that hopefully at a later date. Those are spoken for funds, encumbered funds, versus those that are unencumbered, or we have some versatility. You go through and you get all the encumbrances out of the way, and then that makes the conversation on the rest of it a little easier.
It's a shorter conversation.
So the question again is, so we're sitting at 4.9 actual for 9 months, but you're saying we're going to go to 17 million before the end of the fiscal year, correct?
Well, 17 is the revised budget.
Right, which is 9 months actual plus 3 months projection.
The big adjustment here is like that little grant right there.
We just haven't received it yet?
Correct.
Okay.
Right.
But it's coming.
Well, there's a lot of, that number, the 9.9 is made up of different grants.
Right.
And a lot of that has not come in yet, has not materialized.
But they're committed to pay us.
We are committed. Yes, we do have grant agreements in place.
How does that money flow into us? We know that the $9 million is a grant and
Reimbursable.
It's all reimbursable.
So we're
Once
going
the
to spend
project
our money
starts.
first and then we ask for a reimbursement from the state or the feds.
That's correct.
So
We haven't
depending,
spent that yet.
depending on when that project gets done. So we're not allowed to ask for full reimbursement until the project's completed. So we have to wait till that's done and then we'll do a final push for that.
And we do request progress reimbursement. As we pay bills from architects or the engineers or the contractor, we get the canceled checks and we request for reimbursement. That's how we get the money back.
primary focus for that grant.
Again, it's multiple grants and we do have, we can change gears. We can go
Yeah,
into the.
most of those are the taxiways. They're I don't know which one we were working on. It's usually the concrete or asphalt out there on
This is the project sheet here. And this is where you see a lot of these grants, any of these grants that you see in this column are projects that are being worked on.
The baggage scanner was a part of one of
So
the.
as part of this package.
Yeah, that's part of that.
Yeah, so you'll see that a lot of the grant money's tied into that list. And we'll go over that list as well.
Was the 11.1 for the ascent horizontal? Is that even on there?
It's here.
It's right there,
I believe
but
we have
it's
it
not,
there.
is it in the actual?
It's in the numbers, isn't it?
It's in the transfers. It's not in the,
Because I was gonna say, if it was in there, it'd be a lot different. If we have 9 million coming in and that 11 million, that'd bump that whole thing to over.
Yeah, that doesn't show in the revenue line. It'll show in the transfer and then you'll see the expense.
Okay.
So.
I'm sure. I do have another statement. Parking. Where was it? That, and that's just an estimate based on how many planes parked out there?
Yeah,
The 590 or the 540 or whatever we have? Do we
we're
know?
down, I think we're down near that 400 mark. Plus or minus.
Yeah, that's right. And so that, if the economy gets good and those, they get pulled out,
Yeah.
that goes down.
Well, they've been moving airplanes out there.
Yeah, they've been all going back to work or being decommissioned out, so.
So that's one of those that and that's where I'm not sure how conservative that is, but.
Well, yeah, I mean, yeah, you can see the COVID effect,
Mhm.
541 in parking up to 1.8 for that first year of COVID. So I think that we're following that trend line. We'll have to keep a close eye on that one otherwise, because we don't know how quickly they're all going to escape those planes back out. So.
So that one to me looks a little too high.
And that number is based upon what's happening in this, yeah, so.
So when they make the decision to decommission these airplanes, we're still charging somebody for parking.
We do, yeah. If they stay out there and they're going to tear them down and everything, they just essentially change ownership for practical purposes of plane goes from whoever owned it to one of our MROs to do the tear down.
Of course, they're tearing down lots of airplanes out there.
Yep.
Two factors. One, they go back to work, and the other one, they go into making coke cans.
No, it's a little better than aluminum.
Yeah, they're recycling.
Some parts for that number needs to be revisited.
Yeah. I mean, I would think that, but we're dealing with preliminary right now. When we start looking at the final for
Yeah,
July,
but I mean, this
that's,
is giving them an indication.
Yeah.
Go back.
Yeah,
Take another look.
I would look at that one.
we're gonna- After we get done with the overall 10,000 foot view, then we're gonna get down into the weeds, as they say.
Giving them an indication of where, take another look. It's
Yeah, we're,
okay right now.
we're just trying to kind of know what we're talking about. Okay.
So that's how to read that one for the Air Center.
Thank you.
The PFC charge underneath here, these are the other two revenue sources that help with the Air Center. The PFC is the passenger facility charge. That's a price per ticket.
Do we control that?
We do. We get that money and then we are able to allocate it as necessary.
Do we set the rate?
I believe we do. It's set at $250 right now, I think, a ticket. So I don't know if we can go any higher. I think we went to the max with that. We'll have to check on that for sure, but I believe that is I think we're at the max of what that rate could be at the $2.50.
Well, I know
Allowed.
at major airports like Dallas, Fort Worth, and Phoenix Sky Harbor and Denver, they talking about terminal areas.
Yeah.
Where the cities offset a big portion of that expense is through the passenger tax.
Right, yeah, and that's a good use for it. We're just so small comparatively. The number is different.
I understand. I would be curious if everybody has the same passenger tax.
We might be able to find that out. I think that's an easy information.
Should be able to find that.
I understand we're not Phoenix, Sky Harbor, or Denver, DFW, but if they're getting $10 a passenger, we're getting $2.50. Looks like there may be a little wiggle room in there.
Yeah, yeah. We'll verify that for you, Mr. Chair.
Because we're talking about expanding the terminal, that's their customers benefit, and that's a big expense.
And those two funds are cover the airport, and the next fund is the solid waste. As you can see there at the very top number, the $5.1 million is based on the 9 months actuals, just averaged out. And the interest income, that's the primary source of revenue there for, this is the collection side of the landfill. We have the solid waste, the landfill fees.
If you could go back up, I have a couple of quick questions just so I understand. The collections that start off on the top there are what you'll charge a month for people.
For household, commercial, anything in the field, essentially.
And then the landfill fees.
That's everybody that runs across the scales to dump out there, whether it be Chaffetz County, whether it be any of our franchisees with their bigger yard dumpsters.
And then the roll-off fees.
Got no money in there.
Yeah. So and I will say is what you see that in 2019, we had all the numbers up here on we had the collections and the landfill together at that time. In 2020, in that budget, we've split them apart because we want either the landfill and the collections to run independently of each other, but partnered together. So the money gets worked together as we try to do projects. But we want to make sure that if our cost of service goes up at the landfill, we're not hitting up our household customers on the collection side and vice versa. So that was the idea of how we track through that. And so that's how those numbers kind of came to be. And this is where we started splitting them out as we went. So, and from 2020.
Well, the term, like roll-off, what's that? Is that your construction?
Those are the big 40-yard containers that it takes a truck. You roll them off the truck and load them back up.
Okay.
So those are those big, long, the rectangular ones.
All right. So where is the recycling calculated in this deal? This where it's supposed to be? Of course, we don't have any recycling right now.
We're not, we don't charge for it. We don't have anything out there that's truly recyclable other than with all of the individuals that take metal, all the privates, I guess is the best way to say it. I would say that depending on how we talk about recycling or bringing it back and everything, I would say that normally recycling will probably happen up on the collection side because it's household recycling is what it really is. And so whether there's any charges, whether there's any expenses, it would show up on the collection side more often than the landfill side. Now, if you set up very similar to what it was done before, it could be that we set the roll-offs out of the landfill, and then everybody pays as they cross the scales. And we could collect out there. And so you could see recycling on either side. Most of this incidental recycling that's here, these are the other products I believe that we're recycling out there, like tires and such, right?
Yeah, 27,000.
You'll take batteries out? I hope not, but I'm going to ask the question.
I believe there is somebody else privately that accepts them. We will take some of them out there. We have that drop-off point right as soon as you get on the scales. There's an area for old paint, all those different products, and then we try to get it into the private haulers. As far as I am understanding is that outside of plastics and your paper and everything is still recyclable in town. It just has to be done differently for what the product is. Plastics are the hardest thing to find a way to recycle. So the landfill actually likes paper and cardboard in the landfill because that it breaks down so quickly. The carbon helps break the other products down in there. But it is the cardboard and the paper is the most easily recycled material too. Plastics, because they have, I think, 1 through 6 different types of plastics now. There are certain plastics that are very difficult to reuse. So, but there's the numbers. I was trying to think if there was anything else on those numbers either.
Councilor Hildebrand?
I'm just trying to, again, get an understanding there, Mr. Neeb. When I see on the item, it says it's 4710, miscellaneous no income government sales tax. You got 240,000 at the top, and you've also got down below in the another 58,000 right there, but nothing coming for the current.
Nothing in the projection.
Nothing in the projection. What's driving those numbers and why is it not there now?
Because that's the sales tax that we pay to the state. So they were booking it as income and then booking it as an expense. And I'm not going to do that.
You track it in a different format, and that's why it's no longer up there, right?
So,
Okay.
I get it now. So in essence, well, and I got to pull out I was just looking just then to see what our actual increase in revenue, taking those things out, taking what shall I say, the loan out as well. Now I need to take out one more number. I got 6,529,000, but that's not correct. When you take those two together minus the loan, and then there's one other item I said needs to come out. So really not projecting much of an increase in landfill revenues. Is that correct?
That is correct. Right now, we actually we completed a study, rate study for the landfill. We just held it back. We need to bring that conversation forward because of the last couple of months. We just kind of held on to that for now. And then we'll bring in that conversation. We'll walk all the way through that. So we tried to leave the collections in the landfill at essentially a zero change out there for that service. We will be having that conversation, and it'll be your guys' decision as to do anything different with that. But so that's why we keep it pretty.
Projecting a small increase, but you take out the damage to the buildings at 355. That's another non-recurring. It's just a washout account. So I'm showing that we got 6,538 as what our projected revenue is, divided by 6,174. So you're projecting about a 6% revenue increase.
yes.
That's not even close to taking care of inflation.
You don't think it'd be higher than 6?
Well, I know I bought a dozen eggs 2 weeks ago. It was $2.50 a dozen. No, they're fair price. And they're $3.50 last week. So I don't know what, and again, it's picking on me, stop it. I don't know.
Well, and ultimately it's based on the 9 months actual, the same.
Right. But I guess basically the question where you're headed, Joe, was about rates and what do we look at rate? I'm not one to pump up. Rate increases are like tax increases. And what we're doing there, I'm not a big fan of tax increases, but making sure our expenditure side, we're going to see that inflation take place. And what are we going to do on the revenue side to protect that?
One of the other variables that are going to impact us, you guys are talking about on Thursday, this is part of the utility bill.
Yes.
That we haven't had collections on for X number of months, essentially. So you will see, as we make those adjustments, if we make those adjustments, you'll see a big influx of revenue back in there on that as well too. The nice thing and the difference between when we talk about the water and sewer as opposed to solid waste was on a stronger footing out of all three of those enterprise funds that the impact of not having those collections had a less of an impact on us than the water and sewer. So, but yeah, this does not take into account a lot with what's going to happen on the inflation. I think my crystal ball does not really work really well with that because we have this growth cycle that's happening too because we're getting more customers. And we have inflation that's going to slow it down on this side. And figuring out exactly where that's going to end up. If you have a better way to look at that crystal ball, I'm happy to share it with anybody because there's a cause and effect on each one of those items, right?
Absolutely.
And,
Could we put on the billing then, inflation factor and just call it inflation?
Don't we adjust our utilities when, I remember the last time
each year our rates do adjust by a CPI.
we do have a CPI factored in there because,
CPI based on.
which CPI?
I believe it's CPIW or whatever that version is. It's more regionalized to us. It's not on the broader level, but yeah, so I think all of our utilities now, our enterprise funds all have that CPI built into it.
Several years ago, we didn't. And we'd gone like 10 years without a water increase.
Got it.
And then when the next time we bit the bullet, did that, we put the CPI on there.
And I don't think solid waste has that.
Call it to us again.
Get the heat up.
We fixed it. It's in there.
Yeah.
Solid waste?
Place.
We added it in there.
Yes.
Okay.
We had a sunset earlier.
Everything goes up, we got to increase.
Right.
It's not our fault.
I think the challenge we're going to have, Councilor Hildebrand, is, and you allude to it, is that inflation's growing faster than us waiting till January for a CPI.
Right. Oh, it is.
And so we'll adjust it once a year, but we'll always be playing catch up with in arrears.
Never going to be on the same plane. We're always going to be behind it. Just like my social security check. It's behind all the time.
I thought they were going to fix that now in the council. All right. Well,
So again, as Mr. Chair and committee members, as Joe mentioned, so the study is complete and well, it's just a matter of scheduling the consultants to come before the committee and kind of just report on their analysis recommendation. The first phase was solid waste. And then once that is done, they'll be studying the water and wastewater side.
we were going to wait till we got through the budget, though. We thought that was more important than bringing that stuff in. So that was the only thing that.
Plenty of things to talk about, there's no question.
Yep. Any other questions on the landfill collections?
Nope. Got it.
Going to the water side. Yes, you can see there on the sales and service, projecting $10.2 million. That is the notation there on the side. The average. Yes, go ahead.
Oh,
Go ahead. Just to elaborate a little bit more, because it's a little bit different than the actual.
Stop, Mr. Quinn.
Yes, sir.
Move any further. So I'm seeing that your water and sales service for 9 months actual is 5.6 million. So the next 3 months, you're saying you're going to have sales and to get received of another $3.3 million or $4.3 million.
And that's, Janie will be covering on that projection of the.
Yeah, tap dance out of the way.
It's like, how are you going to do that? $4.3 million in 3 months.
Yeah, the projected amount, this projected air center amount. What do we have here? Here's the notes for that projection of the 10.2.
well, and part of that is bringing in the airport, part two, the revenue from the airport. What we are paying the airport for the water rights is, what, $549,000, something like that. It's in here somewhere.
About 3 pages.
But and the reason, if you look at 2019, 20, and 21, our actuals would be running about 10 million.
Right.
And when you look at the actuals for 22, it's down. And that's why the average was done on the prior 3 years. If we get the resolutions through. That's going to add some of that to there that are going before you.
That's just on receipts. So you're down receipt wise over $3 million for the year you will be. That's a whole separate topic. It's going to hit before the council to talk about that.
Yeah, you guys talk on that, and I think there's like 1.5 on both those resolutions.
Yep.
So you're right, and then we're still short the remainder of that based on that, so.
And that would be feasible to bring in the next 3 months, would be the 1.5.
So if you add that back in, and you're saying you'd be right on track,
Right.
or you would be on track to what previous years were.
Right.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Can you explain it? I was just resting you.
Probably one of the things to talk about there, and I'm not sure what is this part purchase 1 year? Do you remember what that's explaining? Back a few years ago, we used to provide water to all of our departments for free. We didn't track it, we didn't account for it. It was just essentially just built into the rates and everything. What happened then is that the generally accepted county practices said, no, you can't do it that way. You have to receipt it in the proper way. So all of our departments now are charged that going rate of what everybody else is paid. And then that money makes an adjustment as a direct revenue over into that. So most of it should be up in the sales and service, but I was kind of curious down here with some of these different revenues. The pretreatment is usually with any of our industries that have pretreatment requirements. I think most of it is probably pretty self-explanatory with the definition. The loads of water that's a lot of water. No, that's people with the trucking. That's people that are taking it out to the oil and gas fields and everything. They come in with their trucks, fill it up.
The parks purchases, when we changed meters in 2017, all the meters were changed to gallons. The parks are still on cubic feet meters, and that's why it's separated out, because it's a hand calculated bill.
And then it comes back.
Right.
Okay. Thank you.
Can I interject? The connection charges, we've averaged them over because, and I can't remember our actuals. Yeah. Column is.
It's the second item down there.
Yeah.
45, 80, 15, 39, 60.
Thank you.
And we've averaged that for that 63 for the projection.
Right.
Okay. And that's conservative, and I like that because we know we're going to have a few hundred homes coming online in this next year. So that's, but then also the loads of water will increase too because of all the building.
Right.
So, okay. Well, that's what I was trying to figure out. When our projections are 100,000 and then we're at 63, but then our actuals are only 40. So we're expecting another 50,000 in the next 3 months for connections.
We're taking the number that was the actual, dividing it out and then projecting out. On average, it should be fairly close to that extra 50, but we won't know until we get closer as we get there. But and then we did remain conservative over on this side just because we believe that it's going to be bright and shiny headed forward. We had been averaging anywhere from 50 to 60 new homes a year for a long time. We believe that number will be increased based upon all the infill and based upon these developments that we've already got going. So if everybody can finish what their vision is, then we'll be okay.
Thank you. I was just looking at those numbers.
It still says water and sewer. Do we have sewer separated?
We have the sewer separated. So
Okay.
that's the water, all those. That's the total at the water fund, 13 million. And
What's the,
Miscellaneous.
what's the big jump in miscellaneous as far as that 2.5?
this is related to the capital projects and it's in the capital list. It's grant money.
Good to that. Those encumbered
So
funds.
that's correct.
Again, would you take those water totals and spread them, see what we 19, 20, 21, actuals are, please?
And as you can see in the 19, it was similar to the landfill and the collections. It was all combined.
Yeah.
We separated them to track better the water and the wastewater separated. Wastewater.
The same concept as what we did with the water, so the same calculation on there. The top number for the actual charges is based on the 3-year average. And then the remaining part are really based on the 9-month average. And then calculated for the 12 months.
Okay, I got a question going back to interest income investments, which is below the line. We were sitting there at 400,000. Now we're going to be at 41,000. You're only projecting 48,000. How did you get that $48,000 number?
It's based on the 9-month and then averaged out.
How much money did we loan from this fund to the airport?
What was that loan?
4 million.
From water to the airport.
It's 4 million.
4 million.
So at 3%, that should be at least 120,000.
Good point too, yeah. So there is that ability that will recognize the interest.
When we get it.
Better be getting it, or we're going to close it along.
But when is that?
Well,
actually-
and I will say that, Counselor, you guys will have a conversation at some point in time as to whether or not that interest is going to go from the air center back to the utilities where the money was borrowed from. There was a conversation talking about leaving the interest with the air center as a revenue as well too, so that you could do another project within the air center. So you'll have that conversation in the future, but following the practical method of what you're saying is that interest would go back with the principal. Back to
Go back to the person who had the money.
Right.
Yeah, so that's true probably in all departments or whatever. If you have park fees or money comes in, then the interest money goes off.
No, with the park fees, that money stays within that park fee structure. The challenge we have with the park fees is that it's all general fund money, right? I mean, that the park fees that are coming in from the building permits, they go into a special account or not.
No, they don't. They go into general fund.
And then you just take that money out of the general fund when it's necessary to add on. So the park fee for any of these developments can be used for building new parks or repairing existing parks. And so you actually do just a calculation within that. So if I'm correct.
Right.
Okay.
At one point, we had it 50/50. I know we voted 50 to purchase land, 50% of that for equipment. We changed that metrics, but I don't think we did away with it. I still think a portion of it still is for land, and then 75 or 80%.
I think you have the ability, at least the last time I had read that, the code was that they can be utilized for parks. You also have the benefit that, like in some of the developments, if they're too close to other parks, that money can be allocated to repairing in the park rather than buying land for more parks if the proximity is that close. So,
We didn't.
but I would say, yeah.
We've got too many parks.
In the case of those parks fees, that money stays in, the interest rate stays with that money in that account if it's not spent or allocated out.
That was a bad statement.
That is, I mean, we have a lot of parks, but then we also got to start looking at allocation of where they are.
Right.
And
We just got a report from the National Parks and Recreation Association, an updated report. Our acreage for parks is actually right on where it should be. I think the challenge is making sure they're all allocation out.
You have a
Regional.
150 yard
passive and all that.
acre park that's in an area that takes away from another area.
Well, there's 800 houses that won't have a park.
Oh, we got Stella Grande, but
I thought that's every park,
well, all parks, everybody.
neighborhood parks.
Mr. Chair, on this as well too, water and sewer is the same fund. That money gets deposited in the same fund. We break it out for our purposes based upon the service level. If costs go up on the sewer side and we have to look at rates, we want to only adjust the rate for the sewer side, not rates on the other side. And so that's the principle behind how we're breaking these things up. And you can see the government sales tax, again, treating it as a liability. I noticed on their sheets, they don't have the note column, so we should look at that. I would expect that would have tightened those sheets up. There would have been a lot smaller font, so we wanted to keep the font as big as possible.
Thank you.
You're welcome. But as you can tell up here on the chart and everything, finance has done a really good job of trying to track where these numbers have come from, because as we adjust them, we'll try to make an update on those note sections as well.
We're gonna have to make a budget adjustment by paper if we're not careful.
Again, let me ask you a probably redundant question, but what I'm seeing here, I'm going back to the water, miscellaneous general, $2.5 million. So again, that's encumbered funds. And so.
Yep, so you subtotal it out so that it doesn't, yep.
Okay. And same thing, we've got $5 million in loan coming in.
Yep.
Similar.
And just so you'll know, Mr. Chair, Councilor, that number will change just because recently the council did approve a loan adjustment
Right,
for this project.
right,
But it's,
okay.
any other questions on the water or sewer? The total there is 11.3. And we'll make those report adjustments.
About in line, pick out the loan amount.
Yes, sir.
11, take 5 to 6, you're back to 21 actuals with 5.8. So your revenue side is about the same.
Can you scroll down just or scroll back up a little bit? And then if you look at 19, 15.5, and then you add the two of those together, we're not too,
It's about the same revenue.
yeah, it's about the same from 19 to here. If you take those huge $1 million loan.
Well, and when you go back that far as well too, of course, the smart meters came in 17, 18 as well too. And the whole idea is that it took them an extra year to get all the meters installed. So rather than make any adjustments to any of that, we tried to hold everything as stable as we could and walk through that. And I think that's where you're going to see that. We've not made any adjustments to any of the revenue numbers. We actually are generating additional revenue just based upon the meters reading more properly. They're based upon a sonar essentially system right now, or laser system. So there's no mechanical parts that slow down over time, which is what the old meters would do. After about 8 years, a household meter would slow down and you start to see lost revenue based upon that. So.
And it also gets the slow flow, which the mechanical wouldn't get.
Correct. Yeah. You had to hit a certain flow in order to get it to trigger. So, all right, that's water and sewer.
Is that it? Okay. That's it on the revenue side for.
Probably the only thing on the debt service funds and everything is that was a little number. So that's just the incidental investments, right? The interest or whatever being deposited in there. So.
What's your total compared to 19?
This added, yeah.
Projection at 116 million. and 119 was a value.
Some, yeah, we'll have to give you that number for 19.
No problem. It's,
It's a formula thing.
no problem.
Just get out your smartphones, hashtag value. You'll find it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
With an exclamation point.
And I will say that you can see in the actuals, we're not picking up something.
No, it's
It's not-
hard because of these here that we needed to.
Not a problem.
move
So we'll get you that number as well too.
Just curiosity to see how we're functioning dollar-wise with the income.
So,
Certainly.
Because we got COVID, and to me, 20 takes out COVID.
Yep.
Because we're only 6 months into COVID, or 3 months or whatever, the city operated.
maybe everybody caught this, but I missed it. We started out at 29 million, and we went to 30 million, and then
No.
No, those not.
What we're saying is that we think these numbers are wrong when you're looking at the revised for this last year. We think that there's some numbers missing that's in that calculation.
It's the formula here. Every time, we need to go back and adjust all of these.
So you have to pop them. Yeah, you have to adjust everything.
Yeah.
So
But
we'll get you that number and everything so you have an idea of where that's at.
So
So
I work on a spreadsheet, that's what it is, so. Okay.
all right,
Go
We
to.
jump to the transfers.
yeah.
And so you want to do?
Yeah.
Now, we're going on these sheets. Thank you very much. We're going to go to the transfers. Okay.
And then the.
So when we start in the general fund,
Just for clarification, Janie passed out a revised transfer sheet. And so
Yeah.
discard the old one and go ahead, Janie.
the revised sheet that you have, I've taken out the transfers for the GRT will hit directly to the funds that they belong to instead of bringing it all into the general fund and then transferring it out of there for the GRT and the gas tax. So it's drastically reduced the transfers that we're going to do. And the general fund, the first three transfers are based on an indirect cost allocation. So we have a spreadsheet that goes in and we put in all of the prior year expenses, do an allocation of that, and then those transfers are made. Those are coming in from the airport, solid waste, and the water sewer.
just a little background on that. Back in 2015, the FAA asked us to do an indirect cost allocation for the transfers to and from the general fund to the Air Center. Larry Fry, at that time as city manager, did that work. And that's where this number up here starts with the transfers with the Air Center. We never took 100% of that transfer based upon that report because the idea was to keep as much funding at the Air Center as possible. But when that was done in 2017, 2018, we ended up doing the indirect cost allocation for water and sewer because we wanted to keep those transfers on even footing as we went through. So just a little background on that.
Makes sense.
The next few are transfers out of general fund to the various governmental funds that we have out there, in particular more to cover the money needed to cover those services in full, to cover all of their expenses. So when we set up those transfers, we're doing them to make sure that the fund ends in a positive number. So we'll do whatever amount we need to bring us to a positive number at the end.
Gotcha.
On several lines down, there's a 4,102,020. That is the Ascent project. And what's the rest of that fire?
Fire says over there.
I can't read the description.
That's
All right.
The fire leases, we are leasing some equipment, or we're paying for some equipment for the fire department. Some, what are they? The
AEDs,
yes, and something else.
airbags. It's for monitors they carry for the paramedics that shock people.
Yes.
AED.
Defibrillators.
Defibrillators.
Yes. So the total for the Ascent project is the 4.1 million. The,
EFIBs are only 2,000.
yeah. And those pay off this year.
Yeah.
So the GRT I've removed, so that's brought it down from the 16 million that you all originally saw to the 5 million transfer now.
Okay.
Any questions on general fund transfers?
Oh, I like the AV. Understandable. So. Life a little easier too.
It does. Because we zeroed out the GRT transfer on here, there will be no transfers going into the capital improvement. We will post those directly from GRT.
Yeah.
The cemetery, those are typical transfers that are done in part to make sure that they end with a positive balance.
Project there now.
And just a little background, the capital improvements fund was what had a lot of other things in that. We broke it up a couple years ago where we put all the road money into the road fund, kept capital improvements for all the capital improvements for general fund. The cemetery, we don't have a lot of money of perpetual care, so we have to feed the cemetery in order to make it whole. So that's just the process we have with that. So
I can tell you all about that.
what?
I can tell you stories about that.
But there is perpetual care funds there, but we're trying to keep them protected as much as possible because perpetual care is there when you can't make any of the other money. So the idea is,
He just wanted to talk about
Background, this perpetual care thing is a state mandated. I mean, you can declare your cemetery, once you declare it as perpetual care without a district court order or something, it remains perpetual care. And the principal has to remain with the state and you're authorized to use the interest derived from that fund.
Right.
And the theory was that eventually you would have enough that the perpetual care interest would carry it over, but we all know what happened to interest rates. They went to the tank, and not only that, but we weren't holding out enough money. We weren't sending enough money into the perpetual care fund. That's what happened. One of the problems with memory loss
Okay.
when I was
Right.
messing with it. I can tell you all about cemetery.
Yeah, more than you want to know.
A whole lot more. I never thought. I never even care.
people are always dying to hear more about the cemetery.
get in.
Be here all night, so. Transit, again, the numbers are in and out.
So the transit, some of this has some federal, we get some federal money for it, right?
Yeah, for transit, it's an 80-20 and a 50-50, depending on what the purpose is for the federal funding. But along with that, then of course, the transit, in order to make it whole, has to take some money from the general fund in order to close out what the expense is.
Got it.
I would say that you can see in all of these that we also have the transfers out to the workers' comp fund, which is a new way of,
Yeah, we did it a different way for insurance. So this is changing that back.
the money showed up at a different location before. Now we're breaking it out by service.
Right, so you're seeing those as negative numbers in there because we're not going to budget it there.
These things are making it a little less complicated for you all. Accounting function. Most people don't know the backroom operation and they don't care. And so we're trying to do things that are more efficient for you and just let the rest of the percent adjust is what I believe in. So.
Let me draw your attention to the museum, zoo, and the golf course, because that was a conversation we had yesterday on correcting those budgets. The transfers that are listed for museum, zoo, and golf in the projections, that is the number to meet that cost recovery of a 70/30. When you look at the revenue line item, we also have the additional cash in there because none of these will meet a 70/30 cost recovery, at least in the near future. And so we're funding it with other unrestricted funding in order to shore it up within that. But that's why these numbers are different than the revenue numbers, is that this is the true number that we would count as a transfer in to meet that initial cost recovery. Okay.
Or to the cost recovery, just the deficit in the total.
This number here in the transfer is taking the expenses and saying 70% they're going to generate on their own, 30% we're subsidizing.
Right.
When you got over to the revenue line item, you saw that number of 850,000 like for the zoo.
Right.
That was additional money to add in there because the cost recovery efforts, the goal is not being met.
Right.
Yet. And so this is that true number. If everything was working properly, that would be the number we would normally subsidize each one of the services based upon that premise.
That's the 30%.
Yeah, that's the 30%.
Gotcha.
Chair?
Yes, sir.
Red flags go off when I see on golf that we are revised as 190 this year, but we're putting 375. I
It's
mean,
a half year.
We had it since January.
since January, okay. But then the actuals for 21 was 199. Now, is this the operations or the?
I would say this is going to be a little bit incorrect because it does not show the operation. Only the maintenance of that.
That's the
This
maintenance.
21 is the maintenance.
That's maintenance
That
only.
is the maintenance only because that's all we had at that point in time. I have to assume that based upon these numbers here, the revised budget is still based upon the maintenance only. It does not have the pro shop built into it.
Not on there, but
Not on
we've
there.
done a budget adjustment and asked for an adjustment. It's just not showing because that revised number is as of March.
Okay. And so
Historically, we subsidized it with about 400,000.
that's the best way to look at it. Yeah.
And so that's where trying to see those other numbers, it's
Right.
okay.
So that's just maintenance on maintenance.
Yeah. And
Well,
Plus.
plus normally it's been about 400,000 that we operations and maintenance.
Okay.
And so that's where trying to see these numbers, 375 I'm comfortable with because
it was right, and it's right around March time where we ended up getting the work done to figure out exactly what the cost of the pro shop was going to run us.
Okay.
And so that's where the budget adjustment and everything of the amendment was coming in there. And of course, the revised numbers were done. The last time they were done is early March. So, and that's why they're.
hopefully that 375 is going to be less because we'll get more efficient and we'll be making money there. But still, okay.
I just wanted to cover those three because they're a little unusual right now.
Any questions on those? Any other questions?
Oh, pretty good. So we get down a little ways further.
Ways. Let's get to this first.
I don't know. I can't speak for everybody.
15 is recreation. In the past, we've had some transfers in from general fund to cover recreation, and I think at one point it was a 50-50. They have been generating enough revenue that we're not doing that. So we're not even planning on that.
I think back then we created that gross receipts tax specifically for the recreation.
Right.
And that actually is generating enough money for the capital improvements that were done, plus the extra that can go into the operation. And that's why you see the change too, right? I think Jamie's right on target for that one.
Stepped off the meeting.
Okay. I think Councilor Perry has left us
Okay.
5:09 if we're going to keep that. Good records. Thank you. Yes. Appreciate it.
The Fund 2620 is the corrections fund, and it's based on the revised budget for 2022.
What was that number again? I'm sorry.
2620.
Correction fund for,
This is for the jail.
that we pay.
And so because based upon the service and everything, there is not enough money being generated out of the court to do that. So we have to cover that differential out of the general fund. So that's why we do a transfer. You can see that it jumps around just a little bit, but it's pretty stable overall if you take out the big ebb and flow on that as to how that works. There's a couple deferral programs that we had been doing, I think, with Judge Mallion and everything. So you see a little bit of movement. And then some of it is based upon just the judge's personality within that structure as well. But we believe that we're pretty close with exactly what the cost of the service is based upon that for that correction sign.
The 2622 fund is lodger's tax, and we don't have any transfers hitting there.
Okay.
2623 is roads, and we are actually decreasing the transfer in from the general fund by 2 million. And then the transfers out are the unemployment and the workers' comp.
Is that decrease in transfers based upon having enough cash in that account? Based on the projects and everything?
Go over and see if there's more of a description.
Oh.
With your 22 increase. Wait,
We added more capital money on this fiscal year for more of the road projects this year. That
Because
city was
of those extra decisions that the council made. So there was a 1.7. That's not in there yet though, right?
Well, and I think that's what that is.
Okay, all right. So as we progress through the year, we set the budget for the road fund. We found additional cash for different uses, and we actually expanded out the number of projects we were doing at that time. Lewis was very effective with getting into the SERPA money as well too. So we ended up getting almost every project we asked for. I think it was like 90% state money, the rest was ours. And so we picked up all the differences, and that would be part of that reason why that transfer jumped a little bit different from what it did. So the 2 million is actually bringing it back down closer to in line then is what you're saying. All right.
The 2626 is the unemployment, and it's based on the revised budget. The 2627 is workers' comp, and it's also sitting out here at this point based on the revised budget. And then we go into our debt service amounts that are needed. The GRT debt service total is set at the same as the revised 20 budget. The recreation debt service, I've zeroed out the GRT, so it'll hit directly there when it comes in.
Okay.
The Air Center has the Ascent projects in there. 4.1 million from the general fund, 2 million from the solid waste. And what is the water was 4 million and wastewater was $1 million. The other 576,648 is the water rights transfer in to the Air Center from water. And then solid waste shows the Ascent 2 million coming out for the Air Center. The indirect costs are part of that, and the unemployment and the workers' comp is also in there. And then we have a transfer out to the landfill of $1,258,000.
What was that number again? I'm sorry.
Transfer out to the landfill from solid waste is $1,258,834.
Oh, okay. I see it here now. Thank you.
Because then you go down this landfill, it's the same number.
Yeah, landfill coming in has the same number, and then the unemployment and the workers' comp on it. And then in the water, the indirect cost, the unemployment and the workers' comp, the Ascent project of the 4 million, and then the 576,648 going out to the Air Center for the water rights. And what is the other? We've got the debt service for the smart meter is going out of the water fund to the debt service fund for the $1,551,000. And then we have the wastewater fund, the $1 million for the Ascent, the workers' comp on it, and then the 2 payments for the wastewater treatment plant debt service, $189,844,000. And then the debt service shows that coming in on the next 2, the 2014A and the 2014B debt service. And then the smart meter of the $1,500,000 going into it.
I know somewhere, I
When
think I
will
brought it with,
when will that retire?
The smart meters,
they had prepared that service schedule.
37 or something like
No, go ahead. Debt service.
I think
that. 37, I think, was two.
it's 20 years.
37.
I remember I read it somewhere.
We won't be here.
You think they'll work by then?
We'll be sitting in that seat in 37, you know that.
Any other questions on the transfers?
Was that
Not
easier?
me. Everybody up to speed,
Yeah.
kind of, sort of.
Now we cover, we'll jump into the debt service. I know this, we provided this information. If you want to kind of just general cover.
We have a handout of that sheet.
Yes.
I actually have payments on them.
Seeing
That's
this.
important to keep an eye on. It's long term, but
I grouped them by governmental long-term debt, the airport, the water, sewer, and wastewater together. The governmental long-term debt, we have top two, no, top three, will be ending early fiscal year 23.
So we've got 400,000, 500,000, 600,000.
And we'll see on the end one. Yeah, 646,051 coming off.
Yes,
So, and we've already got the last payment on all those
it will be.
encumbered.
They'll be part of this budget.
Yeah.
It's a fire department and defibrillators and road services at the top one.
The GEO bond.
The geo bond goes away. Let me ask you about that.
Or
Does that stay on if we take no action, or it's got to come off?
If you take no action, it comes off.
Takes no action.
All three of those will come off.
What is-
Yeah. You'll still have the capacity, but you won't be taxing the people.
That's right.
You'll wait a year before you can add it.
Yeah, wait a year.
what is the rate, ad valorem rate on that? What, are they looking at a mil, half a mil, quarter of a mil
It's
coming off?
It's not much.
So eight,
Hey,
No, only one of them affected by the CO bond. The other two are actually fire protection. Right. Farming against it.
fire against it.
You won't see that, so it would be that CO bond from 2008.
pretty quick.
Mr. Chair, I have to leave, but since we're not making decisions here, I don't think that'll affect your.
Well, we're going to make some after you leave.
The big thing is making sure that we all understand what the numbers are, because as we get closer to, I'm assuming next week, we'll start to make subtle adjustments, whatever it is.
I got a 5:30.
Have an open discussion on plans going forward at the end of this presentation, because I thought we need to get focus on where we're at.
5:30 that I got people waiting on before, so.
All right, thank you.
Got no-
We just lost our phone.
Check and make sure Councilor Perry's still online.
He left at 5:09.
5:09.
Meeting's adjourned. We got no quorum.
No, we're gonna still go.
No,
We're gonna,
can't make a decision.
can't make a decision.
I'm very disappointed.
Hmm?
I'm very disappointed
In what?
that we don't have a quorum.
Well, I get it, but we got to get through this. And then we gotta, then we gotta,
I'm just expressing
I understand.
my concern as the commitment
Oh,
to serving the city.
I got it. I hear you loud and
Councilor
clear.
Preston?
Mr. Chair,
Sir,
if I can, I don't believe you could have counted Councilor Perry as part of the quorum to begin with. According to the Open Meetings Act, he had to be able to be heard by the individuals in the room and was able to communicate back and forth. So when he wasn't able to do that, as I understand the Open Meetings Act, I don't think you even had him as part of the quorum.
Right, so we have to give us
he
here.
wasn't part of the forum, and I made the statement that he's here listening, but he can't.
Yeah.
I made that statement, so.
I guess the good thing is, for the sake of the committee, though, we had three counselors here.
Right.
And so the quorum left at 5:23.
But we need to,
Yeah, what I'd recommend, Mr. Chair, is that we close the formal meeting. We'll continue the conversation.
okay,
We keep everybody online, we continue recording, but we need to formally close the meeting because of the lack of a quorum. Is everybody good with that?
Yep. That gotta work, because we gotta get through this, because we just got a few days left to get a budget hammered out, and we've still got some I'm going to make some general discussions, and I guess as chairman, I can just make those decisions.
Keep recording?
I was hoping.
Yeah, I would keep recording just for the sake of.
Feedback from the committee members, but I don't have any committee members. Well, I've got one. So but we need to get finished up because this was on the agenda and this debt service is important. So let's proceed.
Go ahead.
I forgot where I was.
Talking about the,
So the municipal GRT bond series 2018 is for police vehicles. It actually goes, is that the right line? I can't see. Is that the one? Sorry.
They come off this next year.
It's the 165,000. So it will end in August of 2023.
How many of those vehicles are still in service?
Those were the used ones, weren't they the used ones you bought?
I can't answer that. I don't know.
Just a question.
The GRT bond series 2015 is $350,000 payment in fiscal year 23, and it goes through 27. We have an outstanding principal of $1,960,000. Convention center is covered by Port Lodgers tax and center fees is what is covering the debt on it. The outstanding principal is $5,255,000. We have a payment of $552,000 in this budget, and it goes through
32.
July of 32. And then the recreation bond series 2017 is for $15,965,000 and is the outstanding principal on it, and a payment of $1,354,000 this year, and it goes through 37. Any questions on the governmental long-term?
Not for me.
Just add a little bit of background as well too on the debt service and everything. When COVID hit, we actually looked at trying to see if we could pay off any of those, if we could actually save money. We were at the point with most of them that there was no benefit to us, and that's why we continued to carry them. They hadn't reached any of their milestones in order to close out and end them. So as you look at all of them, we did look at that, and it was probably less restrictive for us to carry them out and just let them go to maturity. So.
Can't replace it for those rates today.
And that was the other thing, is that you couldn't borrow for it, so.
For the airport, there is a revenue bond series 2017. The principal on it's $1,790,000, a payment of $246,358.75, and it matures in 29. And the only other debt that is listed for the airport is the intergovernmental loan for the $11.1 million. %, yes. For water, we have 2 joint water and sewer utility improvement bonds. And one goes through 25 and the other goes through 34. Totals a little over $1 million. That is budgeted for fiscal year 23. We have the 2D watering facility loans. I've seen documents on those. I know the interest rate is going to be the 0.5, but I haven't received anything to tell me what the interest or the payment amounts will be on that yet. We've got the utility revenue bond series 2017 for the smart meters. The outstanding principal on it's $16,035,000. It matures in 37. And the payment for 23 is $1,593,350. We have 2 drinking water state revolving loans, 2014 and a 2019. They go through 39 and 40. That's a long time.
Yeah.
For about $7 million total on both of those, and the payment's about $360,000 for the 2.
Were those, the units for the dewatering thing, is that screw thing or whatever, or you bought 2 of them?
Yes, sir.
There's one for each one of them?
Yeah, the screw press, yeah, there's 2 screw presses in that room.
Any questions on water, sewer, and wastewater? And the final one on there is a landfill. It's for the cell 5A and the Caterpillar that we did last year. The principal on it's $5,436,000, a payment of $568,000 due in fiscal year 23, and it matures in 31.
Is Caterpillar tied to that, or is it a separate one? It's
There's not.
tied right to it, so that equipment will last 10 years.
How long will the cell last?
We're looking at least 15, possibly with the Caterpillar, it's going to be able to extend the life of the cell and to give us time to do better planning for cell 5B.
The goal is 20 to 25 years, I believe, is what we're hearing, based on the technology that we're using for the compaction and everything. The cells should last that long.
But the loan was done for a 10-year timeframe.
Gotcha.
I mean, probably just a little backup on this as well too, is the only reason we actually looked at borrowing for these items is that when you look at a 0.15% to a 1.2%, the borrowing was a lot better to use somebody else's money instead of ours. The interest rates were low enough that we kind of snuck in there with that one, and that Caterpillar was an expensive piece, but otherwise we would have just used cash on hand for most of this as well anyway. But the idea was to borrow when it's cheap.
It makes sense, those kind of rates, it really does. You don't know which one will never yourself, but there's a point in time you do something like that.
So that's a purchase, correct? I mean, we're going to own it when it's paid off.
Yes, yes, sir.
So what kind of deal do we have with Caterpillar? I assume it's got computer stuff on it. What kind of agreement do we have with Caterpillar that they're going to keep updating all that stuff?
Do you know what the warranty and the work on that is?
No, I don't, but we can get the details to you all.
Yeah, I think I can't get you right to where your answer is, but this bigger equipment actually has a fairly good life expectancy of that. And so I think we're okay, but I don't know how far out they go that with those kind of components.
Well, that's one of the problems we have with the county equipment.
Sure.
We shifted slowly to leases so we could keep that gun computers updated, because whenever you purchase it.
Yep.
And the computer stuff goes haywire, they go, oh, yeah, for $1 million, we'll come out there and look at it. You know?
Yeah, I'd say we're a little behind where you guys went with the county with that leasing, because we are looking at leasing a lot of the smaller vehicles that seem to wear out faster because they're just easier. We've run into some challenges within the state of New Mexico with the leasing of public safety vehicles.
Right.
But we're working our way through that. But most of all the other vehicles through the water and sewer and everything, we're hoping that we're going to be able to set up that lease replacement. I guess the good thing about it is that when we buy vehicles in water and sewer, we keep them in that department for 5 years and then we transfer them into the general fund. So rather than buying a lot of park trucks with general fund tax money, we're buying them out of utilities. But when they finish their service over there, we've got another 10 years of life. We just change the use of what that vehicle is for as much as possible. We broke that a little bit when we went out and bought the backhoe for the cemetery, for the cemetery, because that backhoe for them will last a long, long time. And so we went ahead and just purchased that one directly out for that rather than to move a utility backhoe over to the cemetery for that purpose. So that's some of the strategy that goes behind that. But we can look at those leases for these bigger pieces. I would say that probably with what you discovered at Chavez County, it should work fairly well because the price tag on those things is big.
Well, there's some things that you go ahead and purchase, like the water trucks and stuff, you
Right.
buy that stuff, but all this heavy road use equipment is all tied to computer, and they're glad to sell it to you. And whenever it goes, when it smokes, like, oh yeah, we'll come out there and look at it. How big's your checkbook? And so we looked at that. And Commissioner Duffy, we started it a long time ago, explained the problem that you have with farm equipment for the same reason. It's all computerized, GPS driven, all this stuff. He said, we gave up owning anything, we just installed. So,
And your backhoe had to be extended, go dig it deeper
yeah,
for the military part.
Yeah.
To bury those, to stack them.
yep, I know, which is an added plus whenever you're at the marketplace.
Well, it depends on whether you're on top or the bottom.
So. Okay. We covered it all?
That is the debt service schedule. So
Okay.
any other questions? We can go on to the next item we had listed, which was the 70/30 cost recovery. And
Yeah, and I sent out my warranty model to everybody. I think you got a copy of it. So really, that explains exactly where the 70/30 came from, what it does and everything. Again, as you can tell with museum, golf and the zoo as our primary ones with that 70/30, they won't hit that mark in the next year. So it's a goal, not a driver factor with our budget. So I think you have time to think about that and talk about those things as we move through there. I know General Services has talked about wanting to talk about it as well. So unless you have some bigger questions within that information, it's there for your review.
One of the things I'd like to see on the revenue side, so you're tracking the number of people utilizing the zoo that's out of town. But see a revenue line that says, that's what we're getting from the out-of-town people, and this is what we're getting from in-town folk.
Okay. I think we can do that within that, essentially subcategory underneath that user fee or whatever, we can show what's out of town and in town. We've got really good statistics on that now.
I know you're keeping track of it.
Yes, we are.
We just don't have a revenue line item that says.
Correct. It all gets lumped together. So what we'll do is we'll build that out essentially as a project level or something,
Yeah.
and then roll it together at some point. Yeah. So, and then outside of the cost recovery, of course, then the accounts payable aging report. All that.
Well, and in our system, it's difficult to get something like that because we're not on an accrual-based accounting. So nothing is out there as an accounts payable. We realized that we've had some issues in paying invoices and paying them timely. I've done some changes. I've got a new employee that is doing the payment vouchers now. She's trying to get caught up. There's a lot. We do a lot of business.
Now, do they have a system or inside your Tyler that you could go ahead and put those out there so that you have some kind of control over what you have?
Yeah, and we're working on that. Tyler is fairly new. I'm going to say less than 2 years that we've been actually using it, and how it's set up and the securities out there for segregation of duty and things like that. The departments have to receive them in and then they come over. So we can have a little bit of lag in that. With staff turnover, we've had some lag in those emails going to somebody that doesn't work here anymore, which makes it difficult.
You do everything with purchase order.
Try to, yeah.
So if it tracks your purchase orders for you, that might give you indication of what you're paying. If you do an accrual basis,
Right.
tell you what you.
And that's what we're working on right now. there was a lot of trial and error, I think, in the beginning of setting this up. So we've got some purchase orders out there from a couple of years ago that still shouldn't be there. So when I was trying to run a report for this meeting, what I was running across was, not some clean data. So I've got staff working on cleaning that up. But our goal is to be current. So I've asked vendors that have notified me that they've been late on being paid, let me know. And because I'll make sure a check gets cut. So I'm trying. I don't know.
Let me ask you this, do you have enough staff?
Yes. We actually went through and we've actually increased the number of people we have over there. And I would say that as we walk into that, we're hoping that to catch up with the Tyler system and the extra people that we have added, that we'll find that balance. We haven't found the balance yet.
Right. And too many of us are too new. I've got a brand new accounts payable. She's worked for you, Sadie.
I thought she was on the water department.
No, she's doing my accounts payable.
Stole her. Great. Good point.
I mean, and when you get somebody new, it takes them a while to get up to speed. And when you're behind the 8 ball on that stuff, then you got double catch up to do.
Right.
So there's a lot of pressure right now within the finance, but it's based upon these scenarios that we believe are going to get better as we move into the future. And then we'll take a good assessment as to what extra.
And every time you change, especially your finance director, we have different ideas about how things work. So we go in there and change it. So I'm still learning too.
Yeah, I get it. I mean, it takes a while because you got so much to wrap your arms around. And you get that, that's not the question with the staff to get to. So, if you don't, I don't care what he says.
At the end of the day, of course,
I can argue about that.
the goal for accounts payable is to meet those marks of the 30 to 45 day, whatever the request is, we're going to try to beat those. We cut checks every week, at least we were.
Every
So
Friday.
if all the paperwork is squared away, that check can get written. So.
And last Friday, we did 265 invoices for $1.8 million went out the door. So.
You have to sign those checks, Jeff?
We have when the system does not work correctly. I know Mike's hand is still recovered from that day. So we had a system dropped out and we had to do paychecks one period. We fixed that problem and we haven't had that problem since then, but.
Yeah. Okay. So, we've been adjourned for a while, but just for my one committee member still here and discussion with everybody else in the room. Next week, I want to probably, I don't know how many of these double meetings we're going to have to do to get caught up, but I want to go through the projections because we discussed several of them throughout the last 2 afternoons on maybe being a little high and maybe another one not being high enough. I want to go through and I want to establish that criteria. And I think we've got to do that before we move on to the budget in chief. And then we need to schedule our budget meetings with the various departments, whoever, and I'm open to suggestions on what order to do that stuff. But if I remember the flow chart right, you've got 5 people that are in charge of all this other stuff.
There's about 8 total for that, depending on where they're at, but we should be able to, we'll be able to tighten it up a little bit for you, I think, Chair.
Okay, so that's kind of my thought. Ed, you?
I'm fine with it.
Okay, so I guess we need to, of course, we've got a regular meeting Thursday, and to keep up with the normal workflow, and then we got to get started on this other. So how long will it take to go through all those requests that are coming in from the various departments or agencies or?
Well, we've done most of the preliminary work. There's just a few. We could probably do it in a good 4 to 6 hours total.
So
I mean, because we've done a lot of preliminary work and to tighten it up. So
that's 3 afternoons. And then we got it.
they're all very proud of their services they provide. So if you give them the time, they'll
Eat it up.
take the time. So we're going to tighten it up a little bit. And I would say, Mr. Chair, maybe set the meetings for next week. Let's see how that goes. And then we can actually tackle it a couple different ways in order to meet the timelines as well too.
Well, I mean, we've got this, and then we've got to get this in a package. And I would suggest to the mayor, he's sitting here, that we have a workshop for the entire city council on just the budget. And then you need a couple of days for everybody to digest that stuff and then actually have a vote on the preliminary budget before we send it off to DFA. So we got a lot of work to do in the balance of this month.
Calendar.
Yeah, if you open up the calendar. So essentially by midnight on the 31st, it's due to DFA. So we've actually had council meetings to approve the preliminary on the last day possible as well too. But I think if you do your workshop and all that information beforehand, then the blessing usually doesn't take as long on that day. I would say that, yeah, sometime early in this week here is probably best for the workshop. We could do the weekend or anything of that nature as well too. But in order to do that workshop with everybody in the room together to hear that information, that's where you're going to hear the difference. Most of the differences is when you're together in that workshop. So,
Well, I mean, I've got my things that I'd like to see. Ed's got his, the mayor's got his. Council Best has got her list, except, just I'm running out of breath. Or Pace has got his list of stuff. And that's when it kind of comes as an opportunity to come together. I mean, speaking personally, I want to throw some money at our infrastructure and we've got some funds coming or expecting to come. We've got $11.6 million round figures, of which you're asking us to consider $1 million round figures on Thursday. So we're back to $10 million, but primarily we've got a good start on streets. I'd like to see that continue. We've got to do something to get our arms around these daily geysers we're having around town. I don't know what all that's going to take. We still having daily geysers? That was a comment made at a meeting in March.
No, we're not having water leaks every day.
Okay. Some things I think that we need to consider is some kind of maintenance on these water lines, because one of the big expensive items, it appears to me, is when they get a water leak, they can't turn the valve off because the valve's broke.
I believe we have a valve exercising program that's still intact. It started around 2013 or 14.
Well, I don't know if it's still.
but that is a problem. There are a lot of valves out there in order to keep up. And so I think other life gets in the way for some of that, but they are trying to maintain that. Yeah, and the most recent incidents with the flooding there, the breaks that we were having, we had pressure differentials based on a break that we had, and that pressure differential broke a few more lines in it than it would have if we would have taken care of some of those.
Well, that, and then I'm pretty sure we got some fire hydrants that aren't functioning.
Yeah.
And that is not cheap items that we need to figure out. Now, I'm not saying we need to put it all together in this budget. I'm just saying that we need to put some money aside and then work on it through balance of the year and next year, put a little more.
Yeah.
I think I heard the comment, we're trying to get $16 million in the road fund.
To road fund. That was the recommendation based upon the study. We do also have on the water side, Mr. Nahar and Mr. Sanchez, we have some studies, work with the valves, the large diameter valves and all of that. So we should be able to play off of some of that in order to get some additional work done. I would say that for scheduling, Mr. Mayor, I know you'll be setting the special session. The 30th or 31st would be my recommendation. Take it toward the end and that'll give finance enough time in the next couple of weeks to do their research and do their due diligence. So
30th or 31st.
30th is a Monday and the 31st is that Tuesday. So
We can do it on a holiday or not.
30th is a holiday. So do you want to back it up to the 27th then? And we'll say we'll just do a Friday. If the workshop works the way it is, because I would put the workshop up in here somewhere as well too. If the workshop does what it should do with your group, we should have all the answers. I would say give us a couple days between the workshop and the final meeting to make the adjustments.
Yeah. You got to
And
get a chance to go through and look at.
so the next couple of weeks, I think the finance committee will be really busy. And so if, Mr. Mayor, if you'll start looking at that week there, and then we'll plan accordingly.
23rd or the 27th.
Yeah, somewhere in that week for the workshop and a council meeting.
Generally, the workshops, at least the ones that we used to do at the county, go fairly fast. But then that also shortens the time of the real vote because you've already had an opportunity
Correct.
to ask questions and then digest it. So you always got a few follow-ons and let the public chime in. Another area that I'd like to explore is maybe increase the number of police officers. And that's one of those deals, we throw the money at it now. You can't get them on the street for about a year because of the training requirements. And I don't know what the equipment costs to get a guy or a gal in a vehicle on their own. Because you got to buy all that equipment for it. And
We can help with Carol on that. We have estimates. We track that pretty closely. So,
so that's what I see between now and when we have our workshop, and then just get this document put together.
and I know we have started on the layman document, essentially the preliminary budget document. That'll have all that in there. Once you're all done with that work, then that'll throw the rest of the pieces into it. It should be pretty close to that date. We should be pretty good.
Work for you, Councilman.
I'll make it work. That's a commitment.
Mayor, can you deal with that?
Yeah. We'll figure it out.
We got two councilors, we're just having a
We just don't
general
want
free
to.
for all here.
Sooner the better.
But just remember the 16th, 17th, 18th, we got the Molly training.
That's right.
So some of you will be out of town. So
They didn't have enough rooms, spaces when you guys went, so some of the rest of us are going to go to Las Cruces instead of Santa.
This is the one they said was for the slow ones.
Yeah.
Throw something at him.
Oh, well. Now, Juan, you'd be a part of this. You don't have to ask so many questions. I've been in those council meetings.
So I got one more question.
Oh, God.
You know, seriously, we do have to look at the wastewater expansion. That's one item that I believe we kind of leaving out of the left field somewhere. But I would say within the next 5-10 years, we really need to see if we can secure that property.
On the east of the,
Well, there's one on, what is it, the north side and one on the east side. The owner, or what I understand, is willing to sell to the city and then lease it back until the city gets ready to.
well, one of those farms we're supplying the wastewater for in Deergate with.
One to the east.
Yeah. So
yeah, we have about five customers out there that use the effluent, 5 or 6, I think.
And I heard a rumor today that somebody's looking to put another trucking yard in out by Leprino. And we own a hunk of that property, what I refer to as Section 6 farm from Omaha to the Dexter Highway and from Hudson to East Grand Plains. There's prime location for that stuff, especially if they're tied to Leprino. That makes it handy. I don't know if there's anything official or just people talking.
It's, the request out of the EDC is that there is no project at this time.
Okay.
So
So, and then that brings up another point. We've got to go through all of these people we're contracted with, like EDC. And there's probably more than he and the Hispano Chamber. We're going to have to get back in here.
yeah, and most of those agreements will go through legal for that cursory review. And I'll just let everybody know, the ones that have been on the council for a while know this, and that we talked about it in some of the preliminary conversation. The budget is only a document. It's a living document that moves and breathes. We just need to get that work done. It's got to be as close to our plan as possible. But if we can't get all of this work done in time to get the budget done, it's okay.
Well,
Tackle the next piece, we make the amendments.
it's not, I'm not trying to fix the budget this time. I understand that. It's not only this time, but next time, a year from now. And hopefully we'll get started a little earlier because we're not backed up by an election. And we can talk about all this stuff during the interim.
And it's like you said earlier, that we'll be able to adjust the priorities somewhat. We'll be able to adjust the vision. Right now, we're trying to put it together. And so I think that'll be the change from this year to next year. Is that adjustment of priorities and vision.
You guys kind of scenario.
Yep, that's fine.
Councilor Best, you've been awful quiet. You got anything to add?
I'm good.
Okay. All right, so I guess we're really done. I'll work with you on, we'll get